The famous reality TV show Pawn Stars was made possible by the late Richard Oldman Harrison. He started a small business that grew into a multi-million-dollar empire. One of its parts was a show about his family that showed the whole country what pawn shops were like. People who knew Richard thought he was funny, had a straightforward way of doing business, and didn't put up with nonsense. People thought he was smart, funny, and charming, which made it easy for him to win their love. But behind the story are the hidden problems of the beloved patriarch, who went through some terrible things. His family is almost breaking up because he died. We will look into Richard Benjamin Harrison Jr.'s life and what went wrong with his story. Richard's wife and son went to court in February 2022 to fight over who would run Richard's share of the business he left behind. Rick's fight with his mother, Joanne Rue, quickly turned into a mess and went on for 2 years. And it still hasn't been fixed in 2024. The sudden change of events after Richard's death shocked a lot of people. They couldn't help but wonder how important Richard was in keeping the Harrison family together as the head of the family he pretty much built from scratch. Let's look at how everything started. The young Richard Harrison was born in Danville, Virginia in the early 1940s. His parents said he was related to Presidents William Henry Harrison and Benjamin Harrison. As Richard got older, he decided not to really talk about this, so it didn't matter to him. His family was trying to get by every day on a very small income. They had to move to Peacock Avenue near South Main Street in Lexington, North Carolina, when Richard was only 1 year old. He went to Lexington High School while he lived there, but dropped out in his junior year because, as we said, his family didn't have enough money. But Richard didn't like to mope around. He became a school bus driver when he was 14 years old. That same young man would park the bus at his house every night and get up early to start picking up kids for school. He would get about $5 or $6 a week for all his hard work. It was clear that he had a rough start in life. Richard met the woman who would become his wife at a barn dance when he was 17. A county judge was the father of Joanne Rue. You could say he hit way above his weight, but it didn't bother young Richard. He wasn't further along because he was afraid to try. He did try, and soon he and Joanne were talking about getting married. You might wonder why, but that was how things were back then. Young guys never knew if they would live to be 20, because there were so many wars going on. Something terrible took place before they could get married. Richard took someone else's car and was caught. No matter how you look at it, Richard had to go to jail because of this crime or bad luck. Luckily though, the judge gave him a chance. Either go to jail or join the army. It wasn't hard for Richard to make that choice. He was soon going to leave his wife, pack his bags, and head off to the sunset. Instead of going to jail, Richard decided to join the military. Now, it was time for him to pick his poison. In October 1958, he joined the Navy. He did basic training in San Diego with a lot of other young men in the Navy at the time. He then worked on the Orlek and the Twining, 2 destroyers at that base. Richard married Joanne after being in the Navy for 2 years. They got married, and almost right away Joanne got pregnant. They had their first child, Sherry, who was born with Down syndrome. This had some effects on the family's health, and they had trouble paying their bills. Richard cared about his daughter. He loved her very much and didn't even think about how much her hospital bills would cost. He knew he needed extra cash. He was lucky that he was raised to first-class petty officer over the next 4 years. In the end, this was the highest rank he ever got in the Navy. He chose to leave the Navy at the end of his time in 1962. However, money problems were present. Then his daughter got sick and had to go to the hospital a lot. He then told them what was going on. My daughter had bills for medical care. I wasn't able to pay for the checkup. My spouse and I talked about it, and I joined the Navy again. It was good. One difference this time was that Richard could work from home and still be close to his family. The Navy put him in charge of the Shore Intermediate Maintenance Station in San Diego. It was a landed station. Even though he and his wife tried their best, they weren't ready for the tragedy that was about to happen. Sherry passed away in 1967 when she was only 6 years old. This terrible event broke Richard, who talked about how painful it was to lose her. For the short time we had her, Sherry made my life better. The Harrison family had lost a child, but now they have 3 sons, Joseph, Rick, and Chris. As Richard's children got older, he thought about leaving the Navy. Richard then put away his suit for good in 1979, after 20 years of service. He said that I wasn't around for about half of those 20 years when he made this choice. That's a long time. My wife needed help with our 3 teenage boys, so I left. After 20 years in the Navy, he was promoted to personnelman first class. Based on his Navy papers, he also got the National Defense Service Medal and the Good Conduct Medal. He was given the Armed Forces Expeditionary Medal and the Vietnam Service Medal. Now the question was what he would do for a living after he retired. Joanne had opened her own real estate office while he was still in the Navy, which was a good thing. Richard got a part-time job in the office of his wife. The business was doing very well until very high interest rates caused real estate sales to drop. This caused the business to fail. A lot of money was lost by the Harrisons. They still had $5,000 in their accounts, which Richard, his wife, and their 3 kids chose to use to move to Las Vegas. It was around this time that Rick, who was about 17, got his girlfriend pregnant. The pair had a miscarriage and lost their first child. Even so, Rick bravely chose to marry Kim, and a few years later they had their first kid, Corey. Corey later played a big role in the family business. In the early 1980s, Richard started a 300-square-foot store on Las Vegas Boulevard South to sell used gold and silver coins. At night, Rick took back people's cars, and during the day he worked at the shop. His knowledge and history really helped the shop do well, and he was always there to back up each piece with history. The family moved to a bigger place on Fremont Street after 5 years, but they had to move again after 2 years because they lost their lease. The family got a permit to buy and sell used things in 1987. After some time, the father and son made the big decision to turn their store into a pawn shop. A lot of time had passed since they last thought about this. There was a big problem, though, that made that dream seem impossible. They couldn't because of a law from 1955 in Las Vegas that said there could only be one pawn shop for every 50,000 people in the city. In the 1980s, the city had more than 200,000 people living in it, and the number was still growing quickly. Richard and Rick talked to the city's analyst once a week so that they would be the first to apply for that very rare and sought-after pawn license when the population reached 250,000. You can guess who got their license when that number of people hit that point in the late 1980s. Before the Harrisons could get their pawn license, they still had to deal with some legal issues. They opened the Gold and Silver Exchange shop at 713 Las Vegas Boulevard South that same year. It is less than 2 miles from the Las Vegas Strip. Around $700,000 a year in interest income came in from the $3 million that Richard and Rick lent out every year by 2005. By the following year, the store was known for having rare sports items, like Brock Williams' Super Bowl ring from the 2001 season with the New England Patriots in football. The thing that people brought into the store most often was jewelry. The number of goods quickly grew to tens of thousands, and it wasn't hard to see how they often got their hands on that kind of stuff. Because they were in a good spot, they were able to serve bettors who often stopped by to pawn something and get gas to go home. Even though this was a great success, Richard was the first person to arrive at work any given morning. It was amazing how dedicated they were because most business owners would have given up when they were making so much money. There was something different about Richard, though, and this would work out great when it was brought up that the shop could be used for a TV show. The idea for Pawn Stars came from Brent Montgomery and Colby Gaines of Left Field Pictures. They loved the wide range of interesting and sketchy pawn shops in Las Vegas in 2008. They looked for a family-owned shop to base a TV show on because they thought these places could have interesting personalities. They found the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop in the end. It was less than 2 miles from the Las Vegas Strip. There was already a PBS program about this shop in 2001, and Rick had been on an episode of Insomniac with Dave Attell in 2003. When the show was pitched to HBO, everyone thought it would be a sure thing. HBO didn't like the original plan, though, which was a surprise, but they let it be changed to the way that is good for families. It was first called Pawning History, but the name was changed to Pawn Stars because it fit better with what they were making. The name is a fun play on the words porn stars. The show was shot at Las Vegas's well-known Gold and Silver Pawn Shop. The store was closed to the public while the movie was being filmed, and only a few authorized buyers were allowed inside. The key people who ran the show were Richard, his son Rick, Rick's son Corey Big Os Harrison, and Corey's friend Austin Chumley Russell. The show was mostly about how the shop employees dealt with customers, bought and sold things, and pawned them. They fought over prices and talked about the things' pasts. The items were also valued by people from the area. Some of them even had their own TV shows. Richard did what he could by developing his very strong interest in cars. When the first show came out in 2009, it got a lot of attention. They thought it was so good that they not only wrote good reviews, but they also wanted more. Someone who reviewed it said it was like Antiques Roadshow and Tootle Family from American Choppers put together. TV Guide said it was like LA Inc., Cops, and Antiques Roadshow. There were about 25 shows in the first season and 33 in the second. Because of the show, the family became very well known, which helped the show grow and come back every year. Many people were surprised that Pawn Star had become so famous that it was shown in 150 countries and translated into nearly 40 languages. The most watched show on the History Channel in January 2011 was Pawn Stars, and the reality show with the second most viewers after Jersey Shore. With how well Pawn Stars did, you must be wondering how things were going for Richard. In the Lexington City Council chamber, Mayor Clark Newell gave him the key to his hometown of Lexington, which was one of his proudest moments. On May 29, 2012, The day was officially named Richard Harrison's Day. In March 2010, Richard and his family were given the key to the city of Las Vegas by Mayor Oscar Goodman. Richard even spoke on stage at the 2011 American Country Awards, where he was a special guest. Richard and the other Pawn Stars stars were Grand Guards for the History 300 NASCAR race at Charlotte Motor Speedway the next year. He also did a celebrity bingo wow for a good cause at the Silverton Casino Lodge on Fay as a guest act. Richard was now a big star. He told Las Vegas Weekly that it was hard to get used to being famous after being on the show, but he liked how excited the people were. Some fans have come from very far away to visit the store. He said, "People don't go to Vegas just because it's Vegas, they come to Vegas since we told them about it." He himself had not changed at all. His dedication stayed amazing. Even though he wasn't on the show, he still went to open the shop early in the morning. He hadn't missed work because he was sick since 1994, which was in 2010. Richard hadn't missed work because he was sick in 16 years. He wasn't very good with people, but Pawn Stars says he would support even when he wasn't meant to be on an episode. One of the workers said that this was just his attitude and not because he didn't age or feel the effects of time. Being reliable wasn't something he did to show off, it was part of who he was. It was clear that Richard thought the store would be a good place for him to do well. Make friends, run his family business, and lead his family. His dependability and hard work were what made the store possible. Even though the store and show were big hits, Richard and his family still had to deal with some business problems. Daniel Callahan, a wounded Vietnam veteran, sued him and his son Rick in Las Vegas, for example. He said that they hurt him and that their shop wasn't safe enough. Callahan asked for about $20,000 to pay for the injuries he said he got when he was kicked out of the shop over a gun dispute. Corey, Richard's grandson, said that his family never had a straight chat with Callahan and just wanted him to leave so that everyone would be okay. Callahan said they threw him outside with a gun he brought to be checked out. Daniel asked for money to pay for his defense and the hospital bills he got in the fight. His lawyer didn't say anything about it at the time. A few years later, Richard had a health problem. In 2017, it was said that Richard had quit because he had a stroke at the time. He stayed out of the public eye and off of social media for a long time, so no one heard anything about him. Many fans still hoped he would be healthy enough to come back to the screen, but that did not happen. Richard died on June 25, 2018, after a long fight with Parkinson's disease. I saw the news on Instagram from Rick. It is with sad hearts that we tell Pawn Stars fans all over the world about the death of Richard Benjamin Harrison, also known as the Old Man. This past weekend, he died peacefully with his loved family by his side. He also wrote a short note about his dad. Our family, the staff at Gold and Silver Pond, and all of his friends around the world will miss him very much. He was my hero, and I was lucky to have a really cool big dad. That I could share him with so many others and let them see what a great family man he was makes me thankful to have known him. He had a great life and taught people all over the world how important it is to love your family, work hard, and be funny through the history TV show Pawn Stars. Richard left behind the shop Gold and Silver Pawn, which shared on Facebook with the Pawn Stars family and the team at Gold and Silver Pawn, is sad about his death. His family will remember him as the best father, grandfather, and great-grandfather a person could have. Fans will remember him as the sometimes grumpy, always loving, but often funny voice of reason on the history TV show Pawn Stars. A very liked Pawn Stars family member, Richard the Old Man Harrison, died. The History Channel also said on social media that they were very sad about it. They talked about how much they would miss his honesty and knowledge. They are thinking about him right now. People who knew the man who started it all, like ITV America CEO David George and former ITV America CEO Brent Montgomery, also wrote tributes. People first met Richard Harrison as Old Man. He was a quiet but very funny natural force who was a strong father, a strong businessman, and the heart of Pawn Stars. Together, we set out on an amazing 10-year trip that brought us closer to the Harrison family, helped our businesses grow, and with the help of history, entertained and educated millions of people around the world. Just a few days after he died, Pawn Stars aired an extra episode called A Treasure Remembered. It had talks with people who talked about him in clips from the show. His wife Joanne, 3 kids, 10 grandchildren, and 5 great-grandchildren will miss him. He gave his son Rick charge of his assets. In his first will, he said that his wife, Joanne Rue, and their 3 children would get his things after he died. After some time, though, he changed his will and left Christopher, his youngest son, out on purpose. The court papers show that Richard wrote, "I would like to express my love and affection for Christopher Harrison. However, for the purposes of this will, I have purposely and knowingly failed to provide for him and his family." Chris is the 3rd boy and the youngest. The papers didn't say why he was taken away or how much Richard's estate was worth, but this was one of the terrible pieces of news that was tearing the family apart. Rick got into trouble with the law in February 2022 because of his mother, Joanne Rue. Rick's mom sued him over family property and whose property the gold-silver pawn shop was. The legal case was sent to the Nevada State Court. The case names Rick, the gold-silver pawn shop, Harrison Properties, Jorrick Properties, and a few other people as defendants. Rick was accused of breaking a contract in Joanne's lawsuit. She said that she and Richard had been married for almost 60 years. Richard died 4 years ago, and she got his 49% part of the pawn shop when he died. She did tell the court, though, that soon after she woke up from her sleep, her son Rick tricked her into giving him the pawn shop that belonged to his late father. She says that she didn't fully understand what she was signing at the time. She also said that she didn't have the right paperwork for the more than $500,000 in cash and metal that she thought Richard had before he died. She also said that Rick had stopped sending her cash from her late husband, who used to send her $25,000 every month. She wanted her salary back because she was over 80 years old and had a lot of health problems that needed care 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which cost up to $15,000 a month. A lot of people couldn't believe what was going on. This was Rick's mother and Richard's wife. Rick could not have lied to his father for money and ruined his reputation in that way. In an interview about the case, Rick said, "The accusations are false, and I think my 81-year-old mother is being influenced by others for their own gain." He said that news stories were the only way he knew about the restraining order request. "I've tried to contact her many times over the last few months, but haven't been able to reach her," he said. "As it turns out, my mother owns one of the companies she is fighting." Many people thought Richard had to be turning over in his grave because of what was going on between his wife and son. The case went on until 2024. Rick and his mother were at odds until Rick's son Adam died. Adam was Richard's grandson. The Harrison family was shocked when Adam died. They had just lost Richard. It wasn't a surprise that Adam died at such a young age. Richard wasn't here to see his grandson come to a terrible end. But luckily, his son Rick and his last grandson Corey will carry on the Harrison name and legacy until they can pass it on to the next generation of Harrisons, which began with Richard.